Welcome back to the Sanctum, everyone. It's the night of the senior prom. And since I didn't go to mine, I'm crashing this one. I also brought Russell James with me. And since no one will let us sit at their table, we're over here in the corner having an intense conversation. We've spiked the punch, and the pig's blood is ready to drop. So join us as we discuss some of our favorite high school horrors.
Cody, what are you doing? Put your dirty pillows away. They're all gonna laugh at you.
When I was a child looking at these movies, I assumed that was what high school was going to be like.
Right.
That high school was going to be this intense, frightening kind of place full of these grown, big kids, right? But in reality, all of the actors were in their mid-20s, pushing 30, especially if you think of about a movie like Massacre at Central High. Those are some of the most long-in-the-tooth teenagers, I think, that were in any of those type of movies. You know what I mean? They're all supposed to be high school kids, but all of them are in their mid to late 20s. You know, it's strange, right? It's like this whole idea of what I think in the 70s and the 80s, what teenage life was supposed to be. That, you know, they all drove around in these souped up vans. And, you know, they all had sports cars and stuff. And, I mean, they're supposed to be 16 years old going to, you know, just a suburban high school, you know. But
I wonder if part of that is because the people making these films and writing these stories, they weren't written by contemporaries. They were written by people that grew up in the 40s and 50s. So what was real important back then? Car culture. And I guess it always sort of has been, right? That's your ticket to freedom as a teenager. When you can get your driver's license, you have a car. So that's one of the big things you're gonna promote in all the movies. Everybody has what's a van? A van is not only your freedom to have a car; it's a freedom to have a place where you can get laid as well. Mm-hmm. You know, and so it was huge in all those movies. But I'm wondering if it's kind of reflective of the people that were writing and directing those movies in the time as well. American Graffiti is all about car culture and cruising and looking to get laid and hook up and things like that. And that seems to be something that's eternal, maybe not so nowadays, but back.
Yeah, and I think looking back on the 70s, these movies, in car culture, for instance, was just part of everything, right? All the TV shows were about cars. Chips and Dukes of Hazzard and I mean because it was just before I think computers came and people started wanting to spend more time at home in front of their televisions and computer screens.
Right.
Being young was about getting out, getting to the beach, you know, like you said, but as the years went on, suddenly it became like who's got the cooler room and the cooler like stereo system and all that other stuff that would become more important, right? In the 80s, right, everyone was a computer whiz, like in War Games or something like that. Or there was a movie with Ron Howard's brother, a horror movie set in a military school, Evil Speak,
yeah.
Right? He conjured the devil through like a computer program or something like that.
Right, and it's that old like neon green font computer.
Yeah. It's using MS-DOS or some operating system even before that. Yeah, green letters on black. But that was a teenage school horror film where all of the actors were in their 20s, except for maybe him.
A lot of these films are really well done. For example, you mentioned Massacre at Central High.
Welcome to Central High, where the rich kids really get away with murder. This year, the in crowd has a real problem, because this year there's a new kid, and he doesn't like to be pushed around. He lives by the golden rule, do unto others, and make it permanent.
You've got 3 minutes.
Welcome to Central High. You're just in time for a massacre. Massacre at Central High, rated R.
You know, that was a film that was lost for years. I remember seeing it on TV.
Right.
And the scene I always remembered seeing was the scene where there's one of the kids is a librarian. He has this weird
like a hearing
aid that he plugs into his ear, and it goes into almost like a transistor radio in his pocket. And the way he's murdered is somebody sets it so that it makes this sonic, he just starts bleeding from his ears and stuff like that.
Right.
I vividly remembered seeing that scene on TV as a kid, coming across it.
Yeah.
Don't remember anything else about the movie or anything along those lines. And then years later, that came out on Blu-ray. A couple of years ago was the first time it got a Blu-ray release. And I picked it up, and I'm like, oh my God, this is that movie that I only saw a fragment of in my childhood. Now here's the whole thing. And then to discover what a sort of lost classic it's been. Robert Carradine is in it. One of the girls that was in 8 Is Enough is in it as one of the teenagers.
Yeah.
And, of course, help me out with his name here. Who's the guy that was in The Fury? Big teen star, was in a lot of movies.
Andrew Stevens?
Andrew Stevens is one of the main stars in it.
Right. Well, and the scene that I remember from that movie is one of the kids who dies is a diver or a swimmer, and the pool's been emptied out to clean.
Yeah.
And the killer takes the sign off the door or unlocks it, you know what I mean? They've secured it. And then he's turned out the lights, so the kid's on the diving board. And he's jumping, getting ready to go into the pool. And just as he leaves the diving board and starts entering the pool, the lights come on. So he sees that the pool's, and you see him midair, like just panic. And then, I think they don't show him actually land. They show the after effect. But what this discussion now is making me remember is that all of these teen high school movies are about people being bullied.
Yeah, of course.
And it's a weird thing to think like getting revenge for being bullied was a fantasy in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Committing acts of murder was like a fantasy. It was the stuff of teen horror movies. And now it's like we're witnessing it in real life all the time. Everybody's living out a high school massacre, you know?
It's come to fruition. I mean, and that's the point too, I think, to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, you were mentioning, you and I were kids. We weren't high school age. At least you and I weren't high school age watching these films. So this is what we thought we had to look forward to in high school, which was terrifying in and of itself.
In and of itself.
Because thinking about, the neighborhood I grew up in, and I think you've mentioned this in the past as well, it was all older kids in my neighborhood growing up. There was some kids my age that would move in later on, but when I was first growing up, it was all these bigger kids that rode dirt bikes and smoked cigarettes and
always had their shirts on.
Yeah, very intimidating. Wore not combat boots, but they wore work boots all the time and stuff like that. And I was terrified of those kids, and those are the same types of characters that would appear in these films. And I would often catch these films as a kid on TV, glimpses of them on TV. Like I remember seeing, they must have aired Massacre at Central High on TV at one point. This isn't even cable; it had to be regular TV. Because I so vividly remember that scene. I guess we can start with one of the all-time best high school horrors, Carrie, which is written by Stephen King and which is completely about bullying and getting revenge on all your bullies. But at the end of that film, not only does she get revenge on all her bullies, she gets revenge on all her friends as well. There is no distinction between who the bullies and who her friends were. It's just complete rage at that point.
Yeah.
Which is what, sadly, in real life has occurred in some, if you're talking about, like, say, the Trenchcoat Mafia, they didn't just kill the people that bullied them. They killed whoever was in their sights in the school, as a lot of these people do.
Right. I think one of the things that's interesting about Carrie especially is, well, first of all, it probably has the best actors of any of those films.
Oh, yeah.
The cast is great. So you have Sissy Spacek, you have Nancy Allen, you have John Travolta, you have Piper Laurie, you have
Amy Irving,
and then you have PJ Souls is in there.
That's right.
You have, and then all the different teachers, and long story short is they're so effective and they're so believable, and there was something so raw in Stephen King's story, as there always is he can do bullies like nobody, right? I mean, he knew what it was like to grow up in New England like we did, and to grow up around like these types of people that you're talking about. They litter his stories. And even the decent people are traumatized by that and are bullies in their own way. And there's violence always being sort of inflicted on the ones you love because of whatever things have happened to you, and this cycle of violence. Long story short is, if anybody here who's listening has not seen Carrie and is thinking they don't want to see it because it's an old movie and they think it's going to be cheesy, there's nothing cheesy about Carrie. And John Travolta and Nancy Allen are so repellent in that movie and so good, and they seem to be savoring playing the evil characters that they are. That you wouldn't believe John Travolta could be this character, because he would then go on to play nothing but like lovable guys for the rest of his career, or at least until later. But so what happens in that film is that you really, really feel you have the empathy for Carrie. You know, and she's played so well, her vulnerability. Sissy Spacek, if you've never seen the movie, she's a revelation right off the bat. The movie begins with some of like just the most heart-wrenching scenes of a young girl going through puberty and dealing with being awkward, being different, wanting friends but not being able to find friends, having an abusive parent. I mean, she's just the ultimate sad sack sort of victim. And then you add to that, Palma's direction, the cinematography, which is always very dreamy. You add the Pino Donaggio score, which is the most melancholic thing in the world. And it's a horror movie, but at its heart, it's really just a heartbreaking story about a lost and abused child who eventually, strikes back out at the world.
It is probably it is the first Stephen King adaptation as a film.
Yeah.
And probably the best, because it's a perfect mixture between King and Depalma. And you mentioned that it's about a lost, lonely child against the world. Both of those guys seem to have childhoods like that. King and Depalma. I don't know if Depalma was bullied, but King certainly was. And I wonder if that is a New England thing. You and I, being native New Englanders, if there's a special type of bully that exists in this part of the country.
Yeah, and I mean, I was thinking about Carrie because we were talking about, when we were talking about doing this episode, it's certainly a California film when you watch it. They may refer to New England or Maine or wherever, or Castle Rock. I don't think they do.
No.
At that point, the King universe, the King mythology hadn't completely been established. He was only so far into his career at that
first
point.
Book, yeah.
Yeah. So that stuff wasn't important. Which is something, too, that I think, and I might be getting off on a tangent here, is that they concentrated on what was at the heart of the story. Now, if they were to do an adaptation of Carrie, which is also one of his shortest books, right? It's a very readable book. You can read it in a day or two. It's not 1,000 pages like everything else he's written. But they would turn it into a 8-part miniseries, and they would have to try and capture all of the New England trees and cobblestone streets and all that bullshit, like they kind of did with the Salem's Lot remake recently, and then avoid the guts and heart of the story, which is
style over substance.
Yeah. Whereas exactly, this movie is all intense. It's all substance, and it's a gut punch of a film, really. But it's a film that I go back to and will probably shortly after this episode rewatch. And probably wish that I had watched before we got to talking, because there's a lot that I'm sure I've forgotten.
Yeah, I mean, it's one that stuck with me throughout the years. Again, it was one that I first saw on TV. Probably my first, and I'm sure it was yours as well. My very first exposure to Carrie was the paperback book on the rack in the grocery store with Sissy Spacek covered in pig's blood on the cover, and just trying to figure out what is going on in this story. Why is she bloody? Is she, I didn't know it was a practical joke that had been played on her. I'm like, why? And the eyes that Sissy Spacek has, the look that she has covered in that pig's blood, is terrible. And that is one of the iconic moments of horror that people remember is Sissy Spacek covered in pig's blood, her whole dream crashing down around her.
Yeah.
And blood is very significant in that story. If you think about the movie you mentioned has a beautiful opening scene, right?
Yeah.
The beautiful opening scene is shot clearly Depalma, right? He's going through a woman's locker room, and they're all it's very sensual. You've got that beautiful Pino Donaggio score, and you see Carrie in the shower, and it's very erotic in a way, right? She's sort of lathering herself up with soap and rubbing herself up, and she's feeling like very womanly, and then blood starts to come down between her legs. She's having her period. It's her menstrual cycle, and everything turns awful. They start throwing the tampons at her and everything like that. De Palma's telling it's like just like I'm just thinking about it. That's her. Her joy is always ruined with blood. Like, in other words, becoming an adult, going into the adult world, into the real world, the price to pay for that is blood.
Right.
You're opening up sexually. You're becoming a woman. You're gonna have to bleed once a month to be that. And that's metaphorically.
Yeah, well, and the sad part about it is too, and I mean, we're giving away. Like I said, if people haven't seen it,
spoiler alert.
But the saddest part of it is the fact that she's a late bloomer, so she's having her period in late in high school, her senior year of high school, and her mother, who is this puritanical Christian, has never told her that that's going to happen.
Right.
So she thinks she's dying. So she's terrified, and she's running around with blood on her hands, like naked and looking vulnerable, and it's sad. And she's reaching her hands out to all of her friends, like, help me, I'm dying. And that again, the movie is so sad in that respect. And even before that scene, I think the movie opens on a volleyball court. They're all playing volleyball, and the ball comes to Carrie, and she misses it. And I think like one of the girls slaps her or something like that, or calls her.
Nancy Allen,
yeah,
or PJ Soul.
Yeah, it was one of
the
those
two big bullies.
And she's just she's completely devastated. And then it cuts to the locker room, and then the opening credits start at that point.
And the only one that shows her any type of empathy or understanding is the gym teacher, Betty Buckley, who will later on be in Eight Is Enough as well. She's fantastic in this also, and she's the one that sort of stands up for Carrie, but kind of makes it worse, right? Because she makes all the girls, punishes them, and sort of turns them against Carrie. And then, of course, Amy Irving is the one teen that out of the whole group that starts to feel sorry for Carrie.
Right.
But you're right with that whole. She's got it worse because not only at school is it terrible, but at home it's terrible. Her mother is just this overbearing, religious zealot, wacko to everybody else in town. She goes around door to door trying to sell Bibles or something, or convert people to whatever version of religion she's studying. And of course, she makes Carrie feel so guilty about sex or becoming a woman. I mean, the funny line she always refers to her breasts as dirty pillows and things like that.
Well, and what's also great is that they cast one of my favorite actors, Piper Laurie, as the mother. The Hustler is one of my all-time favorite films, and she's in that.
Oh, wow.
She stars opposite Paul Newman as the woman that he loves and loses, and she's so raw and fantastic in that movie. And then De Palma brought her in to play the mother, and she's beautiful.
Yeah,
she's like a beautiful woman, but she wears like high collared shirts and blouses and stuff like that. So she kind of looks, but she's got this long flowing hair that's really like, she's kind of sexy, and that isn't to be lost on the audience. You know what I mean? You're kind of aware, especially if you're an older person or a young adult watching it. Who Piper Laurie is, right? She'd then go on to be on Twin Peaks years later and stuff like that. But so that they're casting this really interesting actor as the mother. Today, I don't know who they would use, or how they would choose to categorize, how they would create that character. But and she's not like an old woman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She's still a young woman as the mother. It was very interesting casting, and I thought, and I just wanted to mention that.
That De Palma, when Piper Laurie took the role, she's like, I don't know how to play this character, she said to De Palma, and he said, play it like it's a comedy. He's like, I want you to play it like it's a comedy, which is funny because she's terrifying in the movie, and it's really well done. But I mean, I think that's De Palma's dark sense of humor to a certain degree. A lot of his films sort of have this very dark comic bent, but
there is this quality, right, that just skirts the line of being melodrama.
right.
All of his films have that operatic, overly dramatic. And this characterization gets very, very close to Mommy Dearest territory, but doesn't go into that.
Right.
So, like Faye Dunaway playing, what was her name?
Joan Crawford.
Joan Crawford. Faye Dunaway playing Joan Crawford thought that she was getting to the heart of and it ended up being campy.
Right.
But this character is never quite that. So it's interesting that he would give her that piece of direction, because it could have gone that way.
Right.
And maybe it does at certain points, especially when she starts to have, at the end, and I'm not going to spoil it, but she has her moment where she kind of talks about her lust and all of this other stuff. She has her big monologue where she's speaking.
That's heartbreaking
Yeah.
in a way, for a number of reasons.
Right.
Because she's almost expressing love for Carrie, right? Like, like in a sick, twisted way, it's there. Like I forgot completely about it till you just mentioned that scene. I'm thinking about the other thing that happens at the end of the movie, which again, spoiler alerts if you haven't seen it, whatever. But when she's like, I told you I was right that this would happen to you. She's bathing her and taking care of her, and of course, the terrible thing happens later on. But you kind of feel sympathetic. You can see that the mother, almost in her weird way, does have a maternal love for Carrie, and that's Piper Laurie totally nailing that.
Right.
It's funny, they made a musical of Carrie later in the 90s, and Betty Buckley would play the mother in, I think it ran for one night.
I think I remember hearing about that. That's one of those notorious Broadway flops. That one night and didn't make it. I know they also tried to. They did a remake of it sometime. There was a remake in the 2000s too with Grace Moritz.
Chloe Grace Moritz.
But there was one prior to that in the 90s.
TV, it was a
and I think they were setting it up as a pilot for a TV series, because her character is supposed to then be. Her and the Amy Irving character
go on the run.
Yes.
And the shop is chasing them.
It's
the shop was always
yeah.
Stephen King's villain.
Yeah, there was going to be they stop in a different town, and somehow Carrie's going to kind of use her telekinetic, which we haven't even talked about. Is the whole idea is that she has telekinetic powers,
right?
So she can move things with her mind, and she's only beginning to realize that now that she's hit puberty or something like that. I think.
Yeah, and of course the film revolves around the biggest night in anybody's high school time in high school is prom night, right? Like it's set around prom night, and the high school is named Bates High School because that's De Palma, throwing in his wink wink nudge nudges there.
Oh, to Hitchcock.
Yeah, and of course it's a overbearing mother,
Yeah,
and. But, I mean, there's another famous actor in the film that we didn't even mention up front, William Catt, from The Greatest American Hero, and he plays Amy Irving's boyfriend at the time in the show, in the movie, and she convinces him to ask Carrie to the prom because she knows that Carrie has a crush on him. And there's some great scenes between them as well, too, because he even begins to become empathetic towards her, and actually what he first sort of does out of obligation, he actually kind of starts to at least feel sorry or feel some sense of of empathy towards Carrie.
Well, and let's not forget the fact that on prom night she's gorgeous.
Right.
Sissy Spacek is fucking gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think he even starts to kind of fall for her at that point when they're dancing and stuff like that. She kind of looks a little, she never looks mousy or anything like that, but she always looks a little like, the makeup free look, her hair always looks maybe a little stringy and stuff like that. But they don't overdo it and make her like this goofy nerd or anything like that. She's just this kind of lost. I don't know. It's really worth checking out.
Everybody looks 70s chic. Like,
yeah,
they all have that nice 70s. I mean, it's an epitome of a 70s. It came out in 76.
Yeah.
Like the height of the 1970s.
Right before Star Wars, right?
As a matter of fact, Lucas and Depalma were auditioning the same group of actors for Star Wars and
Carrie, that's correct. I remember that.
William Catt read for Han Solo. I think Amy Irving read for Princess Leia. They all read for alternate roles, and then they sort of picked who they wanted for their movies.
Right.
I by far think that Carrie has much greater staying power than Star Wars.
Yeah,
they're two different types of films, but
the acting is certainly better.
It's De Palma at the top of his form,
right.
And like you said, it's about the horrors of adolescence, the horrors of high school, which is what a lot of these films are, and a lot of these horror movies are that deal with teenagers at the time. Of course, are going to be about metaphors for growing up and being bullied and things along those lines. The prom scene is a tour de force. I mean, from how beautiful it is when she's dancing with William Catt. What's the song? Do you remember the name of this? There's a song that's playing when they're dancing together. I forget. And they get elected prom king and queen, but it's kind of a setup.
It's been rigged. Yeah,
it's been rigged. And she goes up there, and then Amy Irving is sort of watching from the sidelines because she orchestrated that Kat would take her to the prom, and she kind of wanted to enjoy it. And then she notices the string. It's like this great tracking shot, and she follows it, all the way, and you see the bucket of blood hovering over their heads, and you see Nancy Allen down there behind the stage,
right,
ready to pull it. It's so Hitchcockian, but De Palma. People say De Palma's Hitchcockian. This is it's giallo, right? Like that's what he was really, the garish colors and the zinging music and just the operatic emotions that are involved here. Which I guess when you're a teenager, every emotion you have is operatic, isn't it? Like
right. Yeah, somebody was saying today on a completely different subject that, if we're talking about kids, all kids are narcissists. And not because they're pathological, it's just because they've only been on Earth for so long that everything is about them.
Right.
They haven't lived long enough to really start to be more, to have more sympathy, more compassion, to be able to put themselves in the shoes of others. But this movie kind of is about, like, especially with the Amy Irving characters, being able to at some point do that, to kind of stand outside of yourself and do something for someone else. So you're seeing these people on prom night at this weird crossroads, right? Some people, and maybe some of these dickhead kids would have gone on to actually be decent people. You know what I mean? If because until that point at the end, none of them had done anything so awful. I mean, they weren't murderers or rapists or anything like that.
The practical joke when it comes down to it is, it's horrible.
Yeah.
But it's more of, it's just embarrassing her, but it's ruining, again, this dream that she has about what she is at that moment is destroyed by blood.
Yeah. Oh, no.
So,
no, I mean, I think what I'm saying is up until that point.
Right.
I mean, what they do to her is truly just terrible.
Right.
You know what I mean? I mean, do they deserve what happens to them? I don't know. Probably not, but there is some. I put it this way: you're kind of cheering when it happens.
Oh, sure, but
then, like you said, certain people everybody suffers because of that rage, that kind of blind rage.
Right, because Depalma takes it to the point where, like you said, you're cheering because certain people get their comeuppance.
Yeah.
And then she's just snapped. She's gone completely insane. Like, and I guess the empathetic part, the sad part would be that they drove her to this, that she's, between her mother and the bullies, she's completely snapped. There's no line between what's real and what's reality, because she sees people that clearly wouldn't be laughing at her. She sees everybody is laughing at her.
They're all gonna laugh at you.
Right, exactly. That's the Adam Sandler bit. They're all gonna laugh at you. But that's what she sees, right? And it's over and over, because she sees Betty Buckley laughing, and the people that... I don't think Betty Buckley would have been laughing at her. You know, she's clearly horrified. But of course,
PJ is the one who actually laughs, and then she sees everybody laughing at that point. And but yeah, definitely go out and find it on streaming or grab the DVD.
It's funny to think that Travolta did this at the same time he was doing Welcome Back, Kotter.
Was it the same time?
76.
Yeah.
So it's Welcome Back, Kotter started what, in 76?
And he had just released an album, because he went on American Bandstand with Dick Clark, and he did his the single "Gonna Let Her In" that was called, and he's being interviewed by Dick Clark afterwards, and I think Dick Clark says, "Oh, you're on this show, blah blah blah," and he goes, "Yeah, well, I'm also going to be in Carrie," and he's, "Well, tell us about that." He goes, "It's based on a Stephen King book, and they've made it into a movie." I remember now that you mentioned that.
Wow.
So yeah, his career was really ramping up at that point. But certainly, I wonder. You know, it's kind of hard to think if if he hadn't followed that up with Saturday Night Fever, you know, what kind of career would he have had? Would he have played heavies, or, you know what I mean? It's kind of interesting to think, because the movie really shows that he's capable of so much more than I think he. Not that he chose a bad career. I mean, Saturday Night Fever and Grease are both films that we both love, and those are fantastic performances by Travolta. And then he worked with Depalma again, in Blood, which is, I think, a favorite film of both of ours.
Yeah.
So, and he's great.
And that's after both Grease and Saturday Night Fever, right?
Yeah,
so I mean, it's almost like that was him going back to trying to be a serious actor again.
Right. That was, I think, his first adult role, right? Playing an adult.
Right.
He had been playing, even though he was an adult, he was playing teenagers up until that point. Which brings us back to that, you know, he's the classic, you know, long in the tooth teenager, even though I think in Carrie he was probably the youngest actor of the bunch.
Really?
He was younger than Nancy Allen, and younger than Sissy Spacek, for sure. I think he was around 21, 22, and they were quite a bit older.
I wonder how old Cat was in that one, William Cat. Of course, he's a blonde man with curly hair.
Blonde with curly hair.
Terrifying to me.
Yeah, and he never quite had the career that I think he would have hoped for, because he had a few films that he had done, right? That, and he had done that surfing movie that John Milius.
Oh, Big Wednesday?
I think so, yeah, with Jan Michael Vincent and Gary Busey.
And then he did The Greatest American Hero,
yeah,
which is sort of a cult hit, and he was in House, but then he never really did anything.
Yeah, I think he had some roles here and there, but yeah, Butch and Sundance, the early years, with Tom Berenger from Looking for Mr. Goodbar.
But yeah, that's definitely the pinnacle of high school horror, for sure. And it started off its own, as all these horror movies do, right? You start to have these copycat films that then it was teens with telekinetic powers, right? That were bullied, that had telekinetic powers and were hurting people. I remember there was one on TV, a TV movie again. All I remember is somebody trying to climb the ropes in gym class, and the person made them fall off the ropes. I can't think of what it was, but...
This is Dr. Durant interrupting my very own conversation. During the editing process of this episode, I began to delve deep to try and figure out what this movie could be called. So I asked Jeeves, and I came up with this film here. It was the 1977 NBC made-for-TV movie, The Spell. It starred Lee Grant, who had just come off Damien the Omen 2, Susan Myers, and it also stars a very young Helen Hunt. Now, I haven't watched the whole film, but I was able to track down that climbing the rope scene.
Do a spin, Jackie. I'll hold the web.
There is one called Ruby,
All right.
and Piper Laurie is in it. And it's about I think somebody has telekinetic powers in it. It was a Carrie ripoff, but the big thing. of
Well,
course,
and then
is
I
Piper
mean, and then
Laurie's-
Depalma turns around and makes the Fury afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
With Amy Irving and Andrew Stevens.
Yeah. And then people have said that that's an unofficial sequel to Carrie, that Amy Irving is playing the same character as she.
Oh, really?
It's just, one of those, like James Bond is a different
Oh,
secret agent. It's one that people have come up with
yeah.
along those lines. But yeah, of course, it's funny. Andrew, there's our two favorite, Andrew Stevens from Massacre at Central High and Amy Irving from Carrie together in a telekinetic teen terror. Another favorite high school horror that I enjoy, and actually that I don't know if you remember it or not, but in the early days of COVID, around the time that we started the Sanctum together, we watched Prom Night via text. We were both watching it separately in our in our quarantine.
Yeah.
We were texting each other back and forth with
Right.
commentary of the film when we watched it. And Prom Night is one of those movies, again, I saw it when I was younger. It came out in 1980, so it was really the early stages of the teen slasher genre. But I remember being at my grandfather's house in Florida for vacation, and it came up on TV. And the opening of Prom Night is, as many of those slasher films did back in the 70s and 80s, is a prologue. Here's the setup for why something bad is going to happen later on. It's a bunch of kids playing hide and seek. They call it killer. The killer's going to get you in an abandoned school, of all places. One of the kids dies, and then the film starts. But seeing that as a little kid terrified me, because the kids sort of agree that after this person dies, we'll never tell anybody what happened here. We're going to go to jail if we tell anybody. It's a complete accident. I mean, they were teasing her and stuff, but she falls out of a window and gets killed, but they decide they're going to keep this secret forever. And it's kind of a hokey trope, but if you go all in on these types of movies, it's believable. But as a little kid, that terrified me, seeing another kid dying in front of other little kids, and then these kids deciding, we're never going to tell anybody about it, let's get out of here, and leaving the kid dead there.
Right. And I think we, as kids, could relate to it to a certain extent because, and I don't think it's too much of a cliche, but we were that last generation that could run off and play in an abandoned school with our friends.
Right.
So we have memories of getting into trouble and like making pacts, like don't tell mom that I did this thing or whatever. You know what I mean? Or like pushing your little brother down and then he bumps his head. I didn't do that to you. You know what I mean? We can kind of remember that from that time.
Yeah. And Prom Night, it's
I mean, you wouldn't see that now because kids don't. A prologue. Well, that's why everything has to be set in the 80s and 70s. to have kids have adventures is because kids don't go out and have adventures now,
Right,
or at least that's the popular thinking, because they all want to stay home now and play their video games. Where,
Yeah, and it's a silly premise, but I mean that was the way all those horror movies started back then. I mean, Halloween probably came closest to starting it because you have the prologue where Michael Myers kills his sister, and then every horror movie after that, there'd be some little prologue to let us know, like, why, who's going to come back, and so clearly this one is somebody comes back to get revenge for this kid getting killed.
Yeah, it's a cold open that you don't really understand.
Yeah.
Like, why am I seeing this?
Right.
And it's like the opening of Friday the 13th. Why are we in the 60s and these kids are playing guitar, and then they get stabbed, and all of a sudden now we're in the present day, and it's like it only makes sense at the end when it's explained.
But it kind of threw you off, didn't it, taking you into a film that way?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you'd just be like, what is going on? Like,
Yeah.
why am I being taken into this this movie this way? Like,
Right.
And then you jump ahead and be like 6 years later, which is exactly what happens with this one.
Yeah.
And Prom Night is one of the numerous slasher films that was made in the wake of Halloween, and of course it is the first slasher film that Jamie Lee Curtis does after Halloween. She did The Fog, which you can't really count as a slasher film, but she does this. She does Prom Night and Terror Train in the same year. They're both what I refer to as Canucksploitation films. They were done up in Canada for a cheaper amount of money, and they have a certain amount of charm to them. I mean, I really like Prom Night now, especially after you and I watched it back then and discussed it. So I think I was terrified of it when I saw it as a kid. Then you get older and your tastes get a little bit better, and I thought it was kind of a joke of a movie. But now I've come back around to enjoying it for what it is, just appreciating it for a cool teen slasher high school horror film, and it has a lot of very effective moments in the film. I mean, like I said, like that cold open there, it's got a kind of cool disco soundtrack. I was trying to ride the wave of disco music at the time. I mean, the prom is the preeminent event around which the movie takes place. You don't know why would the killer wait 6 years to take revenge on the people, and of course the people that are all the kids that were involved in that hide and seek game. They're all going to be knocked off one by one. And it kind of has an Agatha Christie / premise to it, because it's almost like
Well, it's one of those rare slasher films where someone in the plot is the killer.
right.
Whereas, I remember watching Friday the 13th and thinking, well, who's the killer? Is it that? No, he's dead. It can't be him. It's her. Nope, she's... And then it's nobody. It's somebody you haven't seen.
Right.
And just like, Michael Myers, it's like he's an outside party. It's like... But Prom Night is that. It is... Somebody in the movie is the killer.
Well, yeah, and in Halloween, there's no... it's Michael Myers
Yeah,
at the time. There's
well,
no
exactly.
mystery. Who's killing the babysitters? It's him.
But something like Friday the 13th takes the killer's POV at all times throughout the whole film. So you're assuming it has to be somebody that you know or that you're being introduced to, and then it turns the tables but this one doesn't. So
Yeah, and this one does too, where the killer, a trope that gets used later in Scream, is he uses the phone to taunt his victims.
Right.
He'll call them up and he'll be like, I know what you did, that whole trope. And there's scenes of him looking at the photos in the yearbook with like crossing the faces off and things like that. And you're trying to figure out like who he is. And of course you're fed like tons of red herrings throughout the movie. There's the handyman of the school who we know he's something. He's evil because he has tape between his glasses.
he's a pervert.
And and then there's also the person that was actually charged with the murder was some sexual predator who they recently find out has escaped. So you think conveniently he escapes at the time the movie opens. So they assume that it's him. Then there might be a variety of other people. It could be, again, you've got a bully in this film who's not surprisingly part of the group of kids that murdered they didn't murder a girl, that was involved in the accidental death of the girl. But him and his goons are roaming the hallways because he's sort of a foil for some of the characters. And Jamie Lee Curtis is not part of the group. It was her sister that died. She went home to go get her books, and then the twin brother and the twin sister went in. The twin brother left too, and the sister was left alone, and she died. So Jamie Lee Curtis isn't involved in any of this group that killed the girl. So I haven't seen the movie in a while, but I forget whether you're worried that she's ever in any danger, because if the killer is only targeting the people that hurt the girl, there's no reason to feel that she'd be sought after for some reason, which is odd because the whole point to this movie is having Jamie Lee Curtis be the final girl.
The final girl.
Yeah.
I have this memory of the film, and one of the things I liked about the movie especially was the marketing at the time. It's a ski mask wearing killer. Like a black turtleneck, black bell-bottom pants, gloves. Yep. Right? He just looks really cool. Looks like a cat burglar through the whole thing. But the actual promotional art featured the ski mask killer holding a bloody piece of glass, in front of his face. You know what I mean? Like a knife. And there might have been something else in the paint, but I always remember that ski mask. And I have this image. I know at the end of the film, isn't he swinging an axe? Is he trying?
Yes.
Who's he trying to kill at that point?
So I think he's just swinging because he's trying to kill somebody on the dance floor.
Yeah.
And it may even be Jamie Lee Curtis is dating one of the boys that
was
involved in the death.
Yeah.
What happens is Jamie Lee Curtis, of course, is going to be the prom queen. She's disco dancing her ass off out there. And her boyfriend is going to be the prom king. But the goon takes his place, he knocks him out and takes his place.
And he's standing there with the
crowd. And it's one of the most horrifying decapitated heads because they did it like...
It was good. It was well done.
Yeah, they cut his head and put him through the stage, and then they put blood around it. You only see it for a flash of a second, but you used to see the picture of it in Fangoria where you could really get a good look at it, right? And so I think at that one point he's trying to kill. I think it's the boyfriend he's trying to kill.
Okay.
But to bring it to that, and we're giving you a spoiler here for a decades-old film if you haven't seen it. The killer is Jamie Lee Curtis's brother. He's taking revenge for his sister. And when she discovers that she knows it's him, she doesn't see it by taking his mask off. He's like strangling her on the dance floor or something, and she looks into his eyes, and the way the acting she does in this is quite really well done. When she realizes it's all done just by facial expression. And her realizing who it is and him realizing that she realizes it, you really almost feel sympathy for the killer in this one. And that's one of the points about it that I think differentiates it.
Well, and I remember once he's finally unmasked, he's crying.
Yeah, because he's like, I took revenge for my sister. They killed her, you know. He's been suffering with this pain his whole life or whatever.
Yeah.
Leslie Nielsen, of course, plays their father in the movie, who's the principal of the school or whatever. And he just, they always had to throw like an old Hollywood actor in those movies to give it sort of gravitas. He disappears like halfway through the movie. But it's really, really sad. And the last song they play is really sad, too. But, I mean, the ending is just really heart-wrenching, the way it ends. You feel sorry for the killer, which is, like I said, very different from any slasher film you've seen or seen. I can't think of a film where
I do remember watching it after all the years, and being surprised by how different it does. It does in some way try to differentiate itself from the pack of films at the time.
And by that time, Russell and I had sweat right through our tuxedo t-shirts, and our corsages had wilted. So we took one more spin round the dance floor and called it a night. But fear not, Russell will be returning to the Sanctum soon to sit down with me and discuss a few more of our favorite high school horrors. A point that I kept running into over and over as I went down the Carrie rabbit hole of researching this film was that a lot of people feel the original movie was dated, so that's why they felt they needed to remake it. And yet each time they tried to remake the story, it didn't speak to this generation. The only version that does speak to this generation seems to be the over-the-top Broadway musical. The musical bombed spectacularly when it came out. It ran for, I think, 8 performances. It was a massive, massive Broadway flop, historical flop. But over the years, it has garnered a cult following. And many community theater groups and high school drama clubs revived this play and put it on. And there's something kind of cool about that. That these are the two versions of Carrie that have endured. And they seem to bookend each other quite well. Of course, the version that would resonate would be the operatic version, the one that wears its heart on its sleeve. Because that's the way Depalma does things. I think a lot of people think that Depalma's films are kind of silly and outrageous and over the top. But that's what he's doing. He's playing with the tropes of giallo. He's being operatic in his films. I haven't seen the musical, but I've been listening to a little bits and pieces of it here and there and watching video clips. And there's a beautiful moment at the end of the play between Carrie and her mother. Carrie has returned home from the prom. The fairy tale is over. She's covered in blood. She's covered in shame. And she knows in a way that her mother was right. Not only that her mother was right that she shouldn't have gone to the prom, but that her mother is right that she is a monster. And she's just looking for her mother to get the unconditional love that she's never received. And in the original version of the play, Betty Buckley plays Carrie's mother. Her mother's waiting there for her, and she holds Carrie and sings this beautiful lullaby to her, expressing her love for her daughter. And then, just as in the film, she kills Carrie.
Nothing so perfect as mama's child. Safe from the storm now, dream a while. Carrie, always remember that I love you. My love is so deep, oh Carrie. Smile at the angels up above.
And as Carrie lies dying, instead of the fantastic kitchen implement scene we get in the film, Carrie simply stops her mother's heart and says,
I'm sorry, Mama.
So after having seen this and then going back and revisiting the film again, I kind of have to reassess the character of Carrie's mother. Piper Laurie's a horrible character, don't get me wrong. But there is some humanity there. There is a bit of she wants to save her daughter. She so believes. She cares for her daughter in her own twisted way. And she feels, I think, that killing her is the only way to save her. Not unlike George and Lenny of Mice and Men. I think she wants to save her daughter from the horrors that are to come. She knows that her daughter is a danger because of her telekinetic powers. When Piper Laurie is killed by Carrie, Carrie doesn't just leave her hanging there on the doorway. She pulls her body down and drags her into the prayer closet with her, holding her mother. And I think Carrie is the one that destroys the house because she knows she's a monster and she knows what she's going to become. And so she chooses to die in the arms of the one person that, twisted or not, really loved her. Ooh, that was some rough stuff. All of the films we discussed here tonight do an apt job of depicting the horrors of high school life, and all are unique and poetic in their own way. The end of Carrie, of course, gives us the metaphor that high school literally becomes hell. But another apt metaphor for high school would be that high schools are haunted places, the hallways echoing with those ghosts of who we once were. The popular girl, the outcast, the bully, the rebel, the nerd, so many different versions haunt those halls. And when we return to those places, those of us that are smart enough remember the lessons we learned there.
What in the name of God is all this maudlin crap going on in here? Are you crying, man? For heaven's sake, I just had to drag Jody into his prayer closet. He came home from the prom with saucy wing sauce all over his fingers. Got it on my ascots. Then he tried to fire a potato peeler into my heart. Thank God I'm a ghost. Went right through me. Like saucy wings do. Apparently he also developed some telekinetic powers and killed everybody at the prom. So if the authorities arrive, mum's the word.
Open up in there.
Cheese it, Jody! It's the cops! Not a word out of you, Durant. What the?
Open up in there.
Until next time, I'll see you in the Sanctum. That's not my byline. What is it?
Walk in beauty!
Until next time, my friends, stay cool, stay kind, and walk in beauty.
You'll never take me alive! Technically, actually, you won't take me alive. I'm a ghost. Oh, why can't I dissipate? Jody, quick!
Hey, Sharky, we sure had our differences, but you didn't deserve the likes of this. No! Jump scare! You son of a bitch! Oh, slippery boat shoes failed me again, even on this rocky ground. At least it isn't the song from the deep. Oh, you son of a bitch!